Hey guys, I'm Matt Chieco from Popcorn Review the Movie Podcast, and today we are talking about Scream. They actually pulled it off. They did it. Now, if you're a fan of Scream and you've watched it, come watch this video because this is a spoiler review. But if you haven't, do not watch this. Avoid all the spoilers because it is part of the fun. Over a decade ago, Scream 4 came out, and I thought it was good. And I was like, you know what? I don't know if I need another one. Because Wes Craven died and stuff like that. And then they announced that Scream 5 was coming out, or Scream as they call it. And I was like, I don't know, like, can you do it without Wes Craven? And then I was nervous. I was like, do they need another one? Because I feel like Scream only has, as of now, 5, and all these other ones have like 20. So I'm like, maybe they know what they're doing because they've been so selective of how many movies they made. I'm gonna go on the record and say this is my second favorite Scream movie, just behind the original. That makes sense because of this movie, and I'll explain that later. I want to first talk about the people they hired to direct. Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett. And they're the directors behind Ready or Not, which is a fun Scream-like movie. It's creepy, it's comedy, it's what Scream kind of embodies without like the meta-ness of it. So I was like, okay. And then until I saw the movie, I was going to be nervous because I'm like, can you do it without Wes Craven? Scream is Wes Craven. But these guys did their homework. Like, they made a movie that both honored the old, especially the first one, but like also like 2, 3, and 4. They it's not like it's a Halloween situation where only the first one is canon. It's all 4 are canon. So they honored the old, but then brought something new and kind of elevated it while keeping it the same. It's very complex, but I was very surprised that they were able to do it. And there were a few flaws, but they were able to do it as a whole. And one of those flaws was like they had the new cast, which I'll talk about in a second, and the legacy cast, which I'll also talk about in a second. Both brought something I thought that was interesting. But before the like legacy cast came, which was like Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, and David Arquette, there was something about the movie. And this isn't like a big thing, like it's just like a little thing that was in me that like it was either the directing, the acting, or like just like the writing of it, not the story, but the writing that felt like it wasn't firing on all cylinders. It wasn't all 3, but like one of those was off a little bit. And I'm not sure if it was because like people were coming out of quarantine to do this movie, so like they were kind of like a little rusty, or if it was because I haven't seen a Scream movie at the legacy cast, so it just was like jarring at first, and the second time I watch it, it'll be fine because I've seen the movie. But it just felt like, I don't know if that was like a meta thing they were trying to do and I just didn't pick up on it, but something wasn't there. It was like stiff a little bit. I don't know. Or like they were trying too hard. I'm not sure. It wasn't a big thing, but it was a little thing in my head that I noticed until the legacy cast came in. And I thought, and I'm actually shocked that I'm saying this, but I'm glad they didn't have them in the whole movie, Courtney Cox, Neve Campbell, and David Arquette, because it was sort of like a Spider-Man No Way Home in a way. They came in later. And it wasn't like, we're here because it's Scream. They came in and had a real purpose to this movie. So you had the kind of like the new that gets collided with the old. And once it collided with the old, the movie was good before, but it was great once it collided with the old. Like this was like a Marvel movie, seeing Scream. Like in the theater I was in, literally like every time like Neve Campbell, like the first time Neve Campbell, the first time David Arquette, the first time Courtney Cox popped on, applause. Like the entire third act, applause. We'll talk about that later. Like literally like a bunch of the kills, applause. Just the little characters they had referencing the old movies, applause. Like this theater was going wild and I loved it because this is sort of like a No Way Home situation. More thinking about it, because technically the 4th one was kind of the end of it. So you're having these people come back, but it's like a new story. Just not multiverse. Wouldn't that be wild though if it was? But this movie like was able to wrap up the OG cast story and use them really well and significantly. And I thought that was a really impressive thing to do because like kind of they always just were like, okay, like we're here next one, we're here next one, you're here next one. This one it was like, I don't think they're coming back. And and I have my thoughts on sequels, but I think this was a very good ending, and I'm glad they decided to end their stories because you can't just keep going. And there was the surprise of Billy Loomis. Ho ho. Ooh, no. Why did I just say that? When Billy Loomis first popped up, I was like, what? And I thought that was a really cool part of the story too, that I had a feeling like after she saw Billy, I was like, I feel like that, and then there was like a secret. I was like, is she related? I think she might be related. And I liked how that was like the core of it. It was like it's all the characters who are related to the other characters, not just like these random characters. There was a reasoning why everyone was there, which I thought was, you don't get much in a horror movie except for Scream. So I thought that was nice. I had a feeling that not all three of them were going to make it out of this movie. And I feel like most people would have said Dewey would have been the one to bite the bullet. And you would be right in that situation. As much as it sucked to see him die, they gave him such a amazing ending in a weird way. It was like they gave him a moment and it just like sat there. And like you actually like, I don't think a Scream movie's ever made me feel like, whoa, like I'm getting the feels right now. For Neve Campbell, for Sydney, she was like, I know, she pretty much was like, you'll get better over time. Meaning like she's kind of moved on. Like this was her last thing. She's like, I'm done. And then Gail was like, I think what I'm doing is in the wrong area. I should be doing it about this. And she said, maybe I'll write a book about a cop and like a sheriff from a nice town. Everything was kind of put in perspective for them. And I thought that was really nice. And I thought I can't say it enough. I thought they ended their stories so well. As much as you could for a movie, like a slasher movie. Like, who gets an actual proper ending in a slasher movie? You really don't, which I thought was impressive. Let's talk about the new cast. I was a little nervous at first, but they brought out the same it factor that the original had. Not as good, but they still had it to some degree. And I thought Jenny Ortega and Melissa Barrera were the standouts. Like I thought the new cast was good. Like I said, they had some sort of the it factor like the original did, just to not the same degree. But that opening scene, and at first when I saw the trailer, I was like, did they just fucking show the opening scene of the Scream movie in the trailer? I was so pissed because I was like, usually it's a big star, and no offense to Jenny Ortega, like she wasn't the big star, so I was like, oh, that must be a fake out, and it wasn't. But then watching the scene, it made every bit of sense. Like they were kind of being satirical and meta about like what they called like requels, which is like a reboot sequel, and also like how the horror genre has kind of got more complex. It's not just about like the typical tropes. And they mentioned this. They mentioned like Hereditary. They mentioned The Witch. They mentioned Babadook. They mentioned It Follows. Like, and how it kind of evolved. And I think this movie also kind of evolved too. And I think they did that purposely. I think they had a good mix of like typical genre with like complex and kind of how it's evolved, because you had those more emotional moments, which I was not expecting from a Scream movie. But yet they had the comedy and the thrill and like the horror and like the suspense. And also Melissa Barrera, I thought the two of them together was like, it's like a new duo. And I think that's what they were leading towards. But I also think, and this might be a big statement, but I think Jenny Ortega might be this generation's Scream Queen, because she also has a movie called X coming out. That's another horror movie. And like, I thought she was a fucking amazing Scream Queen. Like she made it to the end. She was the opening and she was the ending. Like what? Like who does that? Like, usually the opening gets killed, and the ending is like the person that you meet after the opening. But she was both. Like, holy fuck. That's amazing. Now, like, back to the requels. I thought that was super clever, because like when I announced it, I was like, what are they making fun of? The first one was, just slasher movies. The second one was sequels. The third one was trilogies. The fourth one was reboots. And I was like, what can they I was like, this is sort of a reboot again. So like, what can they add different? And they did these like requels, and also the more complex, more like dramatic horror movies and complex horror movies. And I thought that was so clever, because I wasn't thinking that. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. My only one critique maybe with that was that maybe they should have used the less is more method. And just, I thought the meta-ness of it was coming out just a touch too strong. I still loved it, but it was just a touch too strong. I thought maybe if they tamed it back, it would have paid off more at the end. But like, to play devil's advocate, here's the thing. You find out the movie is about the killers wanted to like reboot the Stab series, and they're like, you have to make a good movie, so they were making their own movie, which, scary enough, I feel like could actually happen in real life. So that was also like creepy in a real life world, and like a real life way. So like their whole thing was like, you have to go back to basics, and the original is so good, just do a new spin on the original. Watching the movie back, you're like, the girl who plays Amber, like she seemed a little like a Billy, and like you kind of know, but you're not sure, and you kind of get psyched out, and you kind of forget later, and then you're like, oh fuck, it was her. And then with all this meta stuff, the first one also had that so much. So I'm like, oh wait, they were literally trying to like not recreate the first one, but like retell the first one with a new story for the new Stab movies. And I was like, oh, that's actually really like you think about it. And I'm like, that's what makes great movies. Things here and there that I was like, it was a little heavy handed here and there. That was like a little obvious. I was like, maybe that was purposeful. And I was like, holy shit, like this movie is so well written. So like I had those concerns, and like I still have it when I watch it. I was like, oh, you can still tell, but it's like in the bigger picture, it all makes sense, and it's amazing. Like it's so clever and so smart. Like I said, one of the killers was Amber, and the other one was Sam's boyfriend, played by Jack Quaid from The Boys, Richie, I guess. And him, it's like I thought for the first second, I was like, oh, could it be him? Because David Arquette just said it, and every time they mention, like every time they mention, are you the killer? You just start thinking, are they? Maybe. Let me see. And I forgot about it because there was a scream, there was a ghost face. I should say, with Richie, and I was like, okay, he's not the killer. But then I always forget there's two, and I realized that later on. So like Richie, I was surprised by. Amber, I was surprised, but I had feelings. Because it's a traditional Scream thing. They were doing this, and that. So like to try and like always second guess you. And there was a lot of twists and turns in this movie. I think even more than the original, which I appreciated. That's why it's like it's honoring the original by telling something new in a weird way, which I think is so impressive. The third act, once again, is like a Spider-Man No Way Home. It's so just well written and so good. And on top of that, it's so much fan service. It's like you're reliving the original one, but like better because like you have knowledge of the original one, if that makes sense. It was so good, the third act. I thought, and that's surprising for a movie because the third acts usually are the weakest part. So I was really impressed by that with the directors and the writing and the acting. Like everyone at this point was firing on all cylinders. So I give them credit for that. And like besides the third act at Stu's house, my favorite scenes probably were the opening with Jenny Ortega. It was great. And was the scene where Judy Hicks' son is like, she's dead and you think the killer's going to be at every corner to kill the son. And like they keep playing with you, which was very Scream. They're making fun of the slasher. And it goes on for a while. And like you're just like tense. You're like, holy, like just do it. Kill him or not kill him. It was so good because it was just like the essence of Scream and like making fun of the horror, but also doing it really well and like having that tense and suspensefulness to it. I forgot to mention this before. The third act also had Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, unfortunately not Dewey, but also like Jenny Ortega and Melissa Barrera. They were like the same it was just so good. They were like the same people, but it was just, and they were going around the house. It was so good. For a good bit, you really didn't know who the killer was because it all happened so fast with like just the core group of friends. And like you had your suspicions, but like, and then like one was confirmed, and then the other one you're like, I don't know who it is. And, like you're thinking it's everyone. It was good. The kills in this one were so much more brutal, but like it made sense because Scream is kind of brutal to begin with, like is bloody to begin with. So like it made sense, and like it made sense in the actual story because they wanted it to be good for a movie and brutal, you know? Like once again, like going back, you think about it, like holy shit, like this movie, like when you rewatch it, you'll be like, wow, like the complexities and the little things you're seeing. Oh, and like people who were hurt actually acted hurt, and like the Jenny Ortega going through the hospital in so much pain. Like you also compare that to Halloween Kills, and Jamie Lee Curtis was like opened up 5 minutes ago, and she's like, I need to get to Michael, and she's like running, like. Like, and then she gets punched in the same wound. How does that? How do you not pass out? What? So like to wrap it all up, this movie was so good. The one thing I will say though, and I think people are going to disagree with me and studios are going to disagree with me, please don't make any more sequels. I understand like they led it right towards a sequel and it's probably just going to be the new cast, but I don't know if, I think what works so well is that they had the new cast but also had the legacy cast, and I don't know if, I think it will be amazing. I think the movie would still be good without the legacy cast and just the new cast because who they have left was great. But I thought they had a perfect ending to both stories. It ended the whole franchise. It ended the movie. Like, it was a perfect, like, we're done. And, like, kind of go out with a bang. I think that's the smart way. It probably won't happen, but I think that's the smart way. I really enjoyed it. I probably give it an 8.5 out of 10. Like, definitely recommend. I definitely want to see it again. I probably will see it again. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Click around the YouTube page. Cheers.